She manipulated everything: my marriage, my happiness, and my future. But what she didn't know? I had a plan that would destroy her reputation just like she destroyed mine. Stay tuned till the end to find out how I turned the tables and made her pay for everything she took from me. Subscribe to see more shocking stories of betrayal and revenge. I never thought it would end like this. It started like any other relationship: two people in love, building a life together. But somewhere along the way, things went wrong. And it wasn't just him. It was her, my mother-in-law. At first, I tried to be patient. I knew how close he was with his mother, how important she was to him. But what I didn't realize was how far she would go to control every aspect of our marriage. Every decision we made, every holiday we spent together, was scrutinized and manipulated by her. And my husband? He didn't even see it. He was so blinded by his mother's love and approval that he couldn't see how much she was suffocating us. It started small at first. Little comments here and there about what I should be doing differently, how I should be cooking this, cleaning that, or taking care of him in a way that suited her vision of what a wife should be. I thought it was just her being, well, a mother. But over time, it got worse. She would call him daily, sometimes multiple times a day. She'd show up unannounced at our house, demanding to spend time with him, interfering in our personal matters. It was as if she couldn't accept that he was married, that he had his own life to live. I tried to talk to him about it, but every time I did, it turned into an argument. He would tell me I was overreacting, that she was just trying to be involved in our lives. But I knew better. I knew that her involvement was not out of love or concern. It was about control, and it was destroying us. One day, after an argument with him where he defended his mother once again, I reached a breaking point. It wasn't just her comments anymore. It was the way she had completely undermined my place in his life. She had made it clear that no matter what, I would always come second. But that wasn't what broke me. What broke me was realizing that he didn't even see it. He didn't understand that his mother was systematically breaking us apart, that he was enabling it, and that I was slowly losing him to her. And so I made a decision. If she was going to ruin my life, then I would ruin hers. I wasn't going to just get angry and walk away. I wasn't going to be the woman who let her win. I would make sure she understood what it felt like to have everything ripped away. She had a perfect reputation, a pristine image of the loving, supportive mother. Everyone adored her. She was the queen of the family, the one everyone turned to. But I knew her secrets, and I would expose them. I began with small things. I gathered evidence of her lies, her manipulations, the way she controlled not just her son's life, but everyone around her. She had a history of undermining her daughter-in-law, of making subtle, backhanded comments that destroyed confidence. It was all there, buried beneath the surface, in whispers and overheard conversations. I started reaching out to people who had worked with her, friends who had been in the family long enough to know the truth. Slowly, quietly, I gathered enough to make her life unravel. It didn't take long before whispers started spreading. At first, it was just a few people, but soon I had planted enough seeds that the truth was beginning to come out. People who had once adored her began questioning her motives. Her reputation, once untouchable, began to crumble. But the real strike came when I decided to expose her past. Her perfect image was shattered when a few of her secrets from years ago were revealed. Things she had tried to bury, things she thought would never resurface. I knew she thought she had won, but I was the one who had played the long game, and it was her turn to lose everything. I knew the moment I decided to take down my mother-in-law, Rachel, there would be no turning back. My life was already in tatters. I had nothing to lose anymore. But she had everything, and I was going to destroy her. I started small, subtle. I wanted the truth to seep into the public consciousness, to spread quietly until it reached the ears of those who mattered most to her. It wasn't just about her. It was about making her regret every single word she had ever said to me, making her realize the damage she had done. The first part of my plan was about her perfect, pristine image. Rachel had always been the golden mother-in-law. Everyone loved her. She was the kind of woman who showed up to church every Sunday, who hosted charity events, and who had always been there for her son. Everyone praised her for being the perfect wife and mother. She had it all, and she made sure everyone knew it. But I knew the truth, and now I was going to expose it. I began with her charity work. The organizations she had been involved with for years, they were full of discrepancies. Rachel had made herself the face of multiple charities, gaining both status and influence. But no one knew that she had been using her position to make backdoor deals, receiving kickbacks from vendors, padding donation numbers to make herself look more generous than she truly was. I spent hours combing through public records, doing background research on her charity affiliations. I found multiple instances where money that was supposed to go toward the charity's initiatives had somehow ended up in her personal accounts. It was enough to ruin her reputation. But I wasn't done. I contacted a reporter I knew from my days in PR. I knew the man well, and I knew that he would listen if I had the right story. He had always been interested in digging into the real stories behind the glamour. I told him everything. I gave him the documents, the evidence, the phone records, and the emails. I sat back and watched as the story broke. The headline read, "Prominent local philanthropist exposed for financial mismanagement and fraud." Rachel's name was front and center. The public fallout was instant. The media went wild, and the truth began to surface in ways she never expected. People who once admired her turned their backs. Donors withdrew their support. Charities cut ties with her. Rachel had never imagined it would come to this. But just as I thought I was about to watch her fall, the twist came. Rachel didn't take the hit quietly. No, she came out swinging. I received a call that would change everything. It was from Andrew, my estranged husband. "Naomi, what the hell is going on?" he shouted on the phone. "My mom's name is all over the news. You really went after her like this?" I was taken aback. How could he not see it? "Andrew," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "She did this to herself. She destroyed our marriage. She manipulated you, controlled everything, and you never saw it. I'm just exposing the truth." "You don't understand," he said, voice low and strained. "Rachel is my mother. She's devastated. And now I'm seeing people I've known for years turning their backs on her. You've humiliated her. You've humiliated me, Naomi. How could you do this?" His words were like a punch to the gut. I had expected him to be angry, to defend her. But hearing him so broken by the news caught me off guard. I felt the guilt creep in. And for a moment, I wondered if I had crossed a line. But then I remembered everything she had taken from me. The months of torment. The way she had undermined me. The way Andrew had never stood by me when I needed him. This wasn't just about her. It was about me reclaiming my power. "I'm not sorry, Andrew," I said, my voice firm. "She destroyed me, and now she's getting a taste of her own medicine. You can't expect me to just forgive and forget what she did." There was silence on the other end of the line before Andrew spoke again. "I can't do this anymore. I can't choose between you and her, Naomi." And with that, he hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. I had expected Andrew to defend me. I had expected him to stand up for me, for us. But all he cared about was his mother. Even now, when everything had been exposed, he still couldn't see the full picture. That was it. I had done what I needed to do to expose Rachel. But now I realized something I hadn't fully processed before. I wasn't just destroying her reputation, I was destroying my marriage, the last piece of a life I had worked so hard to build. The sound of the phone slamming down echoed in my ears, the harsh reality of Andrew's words hitting me like a slap across the face. He had chosen her. He had chosen his mother over everything I had done, over the truth I had exposed, over the marriage we had once shared. I was stunned for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. But then, a wave of cold anger washed over me. I had gone through so much to get to this point. I had fought for myself, for my dignity. I had spent months building a life without him, a life without her. And now I realized something. I had won, but winning didn't feel like I expected it to. In that moment, as I sat alone in the quiet of my apartment, I understood something that had eluded me before. The revenge I had taken, the reputation I had ruined, the life I had torn apart. It wasn't just about Rachel. It was about me, too. I had been so focused on making her pay for what she did, I hadn't stopped to consider what it would cost me in the end. I thought I had been playing the game, but it felt like I had been caught in it. I had manipulated the pieces, exposed Rachel's lies, and now Andrew was gone. He couldn't see past his own guilt, his loyalty to his mother, to even try and see the truth in what I was doing. I never wanted this, to lose him, but I didn't know how to fix it anymore. As much as I tried to convince myself that Rachel was the villain in this story, I couldn't deny that my actions, too, had a price. I had dragged my marriage through the mud. I had used revenge to rebuild myself. But now that the dust was settling, I had nothing but a feeling of emptiness where my relationship once stood. I thought about the future I had envisioned with Andrew, a future that had once been bright and full of hope. But now, all I had was the weight of my choices. What had I really accomplished? Was destroying Rachel's reputation worth the destruction of my marriage? Was it worth losing the last piece of myself that had been tied to him? It wasn't just her reputation I had ruined. It was mine, too. I realized that I couldn't keep living in the aftermath of this war I had waged. I had to make a choice. Would I continue to let anger dictate my every move? Or would I find a way to rebuild my life, without him and without her? The next day, I found myself standing at the edge of a cliff, metaphorically speaking. I had spent so long focusing on revenge that I hadn't given myself the chance to heal. I hadn't given myself the space to grieve. I needed to let go. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could choose how I responded to it. I started by pulling away. I had been consumed by the need to hurt Rachel, but in doing so, I had lost sight of my own healing. I reached out to my friends, the ones who had always been there, the ones who knew me before all of this. I sought their advice, their support. I slowly began to rebuild my life, one step at a time. But I knew the road to healing wasn't going to be easy. I didn't reach out to Andrew. I didn't need to. The ball was in his court now. I had given him every chance to fight for me, but in the end, it was clear that he had made his choice. And I wasn't going to beg for someone who was willing to turn his back on me. Rachel? She continued to spiral. Her fall from grace wasn't just about the businesses and the public scandal. It was about her own isolation, her own inner struggle. And while part of me felt satisfaction in watching her crumble, the other part of me knew that I didn't want to be the woman who stood in the ashes of someone else's destruction. I wasn't that woman anymore. I had a life to live, and I couldn't waste it on people who weren't worth my time or energy. It had been weeks since the fallout, since the truth came to light, and my marriage, my life as I knew it, crumbled before my eyes. The whirlwind of revenge, the bitter satisfaction of seeing Rachel's world unravel, was slowly fading. I had won, but at what cost? I spent hours staring at the empty walls of my apartment, the silence of the space echoing around me. Every piece of furniture, every object in the room felt like a symbol of what had been lost: my marriage, my trust, my peace. I had sacrificed so much in the name of revenge, but now I wasn't sure it had been worth it. I had been so focused on getting even, on tearing Rachel down and making her pay for what she had done, that I hadn't stopped to ask myself what I was losing in the process. The anger, the pain, the calculated decisions had consumed me. I was a different person now, someone I wasn't entirely sure I recognized. But something inside me shifted as I sat alone in the dim light of the apartment. I couldn't keep living like this. I had been caught in a cycle of destruction, one that had led to nothing but emptiness. The only way forward was to reclaim my life, to find peace, to build a future for myself. I had spent years being defined by the choices of others, my husband, his family, even Rachel. It was time to define myself. The first step was to let go of the need to control what was out of my reach. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the hurt, the betrayal, or the damage I had caused, but I could take control of what came next. I took a long walk that evening, breathing in the crisp air. The city lights flickered in the distance, but in that moment, the chaos of my mind began to settle. It was like I had been holding my breath for months, and now I was finally exhaling. When I returned home, I took a deep breath and pulled up my laptop. I had a project I had been putting off for too long, something I had always dreamed of doing but never had the time or energy to pursue. I started a blog. It wasn't just any blog. It was a place where I could share my story, my lessons, and most importantly, my journey of healing. I wanted to create a space where women who had been through similar struggles could find support and strength, a place where they could reclaim their lives, just as I was reclaiming mine. The first post was a simple reflection on everything I had gone through. I didn't hold back. I wrote about my heartbreak, my anger, and how I was learning to heal from it. I wrote about the painful lessons I had learned, how holding onto bitterness and resentment only hurt myself in the end. As I typed, I realized that the power of my story wasn't in the revenge I had taken, but in the strength I had found in moving forward. The real victory wasn't in making them pay. It was in deciding not to let them define me. I hit publish on the post and sat back in my chair, staring at the words on the screen. I had no idea where this journey would take me, but it felt right. It felt like a new beginning. Over the next few weeks, I continued to write, sharing my thoughts on self-worth, self-love, and moving on from toxic relationships. I began to find a community of like-minded women who resonated with my experiences. The support was overwhelming, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible. I wasn't looking for validation anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me I was worthy. I had discovered that I was enough on my own, that I didn't need anyone's approval to live the life I wanted. But that didn't mean the past was completely gone. Andrew still lingered in my mind, and Rachel's face still haunted me from time to time. But they no longer had the power to control my emotions. They were part of my past, and I was ready to leave them there. I had always believed that everything I wanted was tied to my past, to the life I had with Andrew, to the idea of a perfect marriage, a perfect family. But now, as I sat at my desk writing, staring at the growing list of blog posts and comments from the women who had been following my journey, I realized something. I had built something more powerful than I could have ever imagined. The more I shared about my healing process, about the work I was doing to rebuild my life, the more I saw how much I was helping others. My blog wasn't just a space for me to vent my frustrations or share my pain. It had turned into something bigger, It was a platform where women who had gone through betrayal, heartbreak, and personal struggles could come together, share their stories, and find support. I had found my voice again. I had found my purpose, and it felt incredible. But just as I started to feel like I had gained some control over my life, the past came crashing back in the form of a letter. It arrived unexpectedly, a hand-delivered envelope with my name on it. At first, I thought it was just another piece of junk mail, but when I saw the familiar handwriting on the front, it was from Andrew. My heart dropped into my stomach. I hadn't heard from him since that final phone call. I had assumed he had given up, that he was wallowing in his own guilt. I had moved on, in my own way, but I wasn't ready for him to reappear in my life. Yet, there it was, the letter that could change everything. I opened it carefully, my fingers trembling as I read the words. Naomi, I've been thinking a lot about what happened between us. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to tell you that I'm sorry for everything. I've made so many mistakes, and I know I can't fix them. But I want to be honest with you. I've been trying to work through things with my mom, and it's clear to me now that I've been enabling her control over me for years. She used to be my safe place, and I let that blind me to the damage she caused. I don't know if we can ever repair what's been broken, but I needed to tell you this. Please let me know if you're open to talking. Sincerely, Andrew. I read the letter 3 times. I felt numb, like the air around me had thickened. A part of me wanted to tear it up, to shove it away and pretend it never existed. But another part of me felt something I couldn't ignore. It was the start of something new, something that had been missing for a long time. Andrew's words weren't a plea for reconciliation. They weren't an apology for his affair or the pain he caused, but it was an acknowledgement that his mother had played a role in the destruction of our marriage, and that meant something. But what did it mean for me? I thought back to the life I had tried to build with him. I remembered the joy we once shared, the dreams we had built together. But I also remembered the heartbreak, the betrayal, and the suffocating control that Rachel had placed on every aspect of our relationship. I remembered how I had felt invisible, like a stranger in my own marriage. I looked around the room at the space I had created for myself. I was no longer living in the shadow of Andrew's decisions, of Rachel's manipulation. I had my own life now, one that didn't revolve around them, one that was built on my own strength and independence. Andrew's apology, while a step in the right direction, didn't change anything. It didn't erase the damage, and it didn't give me back the life I had lost. But it was a reminder that I had chosen the right path. I wasn't ready to forgive him. I wasn't ready to invite him back into my life, not after everything that had happened. But for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I had made the right choice, the choice to move forward and to take back control. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, closing it with a soft click. I wasn't going to hold on to the past anymore. It was time to look ahead, to continue building the life I deserved, without the weight of his mistakes holding me back. It had been a month since Andrew's letter arrived, and in that time I had made the decision to focus on myself. The past was no longer my anchor. It no longer held me down. I was no longer shackled by the emotional baggage of Andrew's betrayal, Rachel's manipulation, or the life I had lost. I had come too far to let their actions control my future. My business was booming, and for the first time, I felt like I had found my true purpose. I had been helping women rebuild their lives after heartbreak, loss, and betrayal, just as I had done. Every day, I received messages of gratitude from women who felt inspired by my journey. It was more than just a business. It was a movement. It was a chance to connect with other women, to help them reclaim their lives, to show them that they, too, could move on from the pain of the past. But even as I poured myself into my work, I couldn't completely shut out the thoughts of Andrew. I had told myself I was over him, that I was done with him. But the truth was, his apology had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't filled with rage. But I did wonder if I had made the right choice by completely cutting him out of my life. I had walked away for my own well-being, for my sanity. But was it possible to rebuild any kind of relationship with him, even a friendship? I wasn't sure. One evening, as I sat at my desk, responding to emails from clients and scheduling appointments, I received another message from Andrew. It was short, almost too simple, but it cut through the distance we had built. "I've been thinking about you. I've been thinking about everything. I know I've hurt you, but I want to be there for you. If you'll let me, I'll do anything to make things right. I want to be in your life again. I understand if you can't forgive me, but please know I'm here." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, a flood of emotions rushing over me. I had been avoiding this moment, avoiding the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to rebuild something. But now, faced with the reality of it, I felt a deep sense of confusion. I had worked so hard to distance myself from him, to separate myself from the pain of the past, to find my own strength. And now, here he was, asking for a second chance. Not for our marriage, but for a place in my life. I had to think carefully. I picked up my phone and called my best friend, Clara. She had been with me through it all, through the marriage, the betrayal, and the decision to move on. She knew how hard I had fought to find myself again. "Clara," I said as soon as she answered, "I'm stuck. Andrew's asking to be a part of my life again, and I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to hear him out, but the other part of me knows I've moved on, and I'm doing just fine without him." "I think you already know what you need to do, Naomi," Clara replied, her voice calm but firm. "You've already rebuilt yourself. You've found your strength. Do you really want to let him back in? Do you want to give him a chance to hurt you again?" Her words were a wake-up call. I had spent so long fighting for my independence, for my peace, that the idea of letting Andrew back into my life felt like I was taking steps backward. "I don't know if I can trust him again," I admitted. "Then why risk it?" Clara said gently. "You've made it this far without him. Don't let him disrupt the life you've created for yourself." It was the clarity I needed. I had spent years trying to make it work with Andrew. I had spent countless hours, days, months, giving him chances, fighting for him, trying to please him. But in the end, it wasn't worth it. He wasn't the person who could offer me the life I deserved. And Rachel? Her reputation was gone. She had been exposed for the manipulative, controlling woman she was. Her hold over Andrew was slipping, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. But I realized something important. I didn't need to worry about her anymore. She was no longer a part of my life. It was time to let go of Andrew, of Rachel, and of the pain. I had created a new life, and I was ready to embrace it fully. I didn't need the past to dictate my future. I was in control now. And nothing, not even Andrew's words, could change that. The days after Andrew's message felt like a strange mix of clarity and confusion. I had spent so much time resenting him, so much energy consumed by the anger that had festered inside me, that I had lost sight of the life I had built for myself. But now that I was standing on the other side, I realized I didn't need to look back. I had become someone I could be proud of. Someone who didn't need to rely on anyone else for validation, for love, or for happiness. I had finally learned to love myself in a way I had never done before. The first thing I did to fully step into this new chapter was to take a day for myself. No work, no obligations, no distractions. I needed to rediscover who I was without the past, without the relationships that had shaped me, and without the emotional weight of betrayal hanging over me. I went to the beach, something I had always loved but never made the time for. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow across the water, and I sat on the sand, listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. The smell of salt water, the cool breeze on my skin, and the peaceful isolation brought me a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel weighed down. I wasn't carrying the pain of the past, the anger toward Andrew or Rachel, or the guilt I'd once felt for having fought for something that wasn't meant to be. I was just me, and that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I made a promise to myself. I would never let anyone else's actions define me again. I wouldn't allow myself to be manipulated by Andrew's guilt or by Rachel's false sense of control. The life I had built for myself was mine, and no one could take that away. Returning to my apartment that evening, I felt lighter than I had in months. I knew there was still work to do. I still had healing to complete, still had emotional scars to face, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had done the hard work of letting go, of moving on, and I was ready to face whatever the future held. The next day, I met with a therapist. I had always believed that seeking professional help was a sign of weakness, but I realized I was wrong. I wasn't weak. I was strong for having come this far, and I wanted to continue to grow. The sessions were tough. The therapist helped me break down the walls I had built around my emotions and forced me to face the feelings I had been running from for so long. But each time I walked out of her office, I felt like I had removed another layer of pain, another piece of guilt that had been holding me back. I was starting to feel like the woman I was meant to be. And then, a month later, I got an email that would change everything. It was from one of Rachel's old friends, a woman I had met once at a dinner party years ago. She had heard about everything that had happened, and she wanted to apologize. She confessed that Rachel had manipulated her for years and that she had seen the way Rachel treated me, but had never spoken up. She was deeply sorry for her role in enabling Rachel's behavior, and she wanted to make it right. I was taken aback. I hadn't expected an apology from anyone in Rachel's circle, let alone someone who had been so close to her. Reading her message, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was no bitterness, no anger, just the deep recognition that this was one of the final steps in my healing. I replied with a simple message: "Thank you. It means more than you know." But I didn't need to hold on to the past anymore. I didn't need to wait for an apology, and I didn't need to keep playing the victim. I was no longer defined by Rachel's cruelty or Andrew's betrayal. I was free. That night, I sat down and wrote the final blog post in my series about overcoming betrayal and reclaiming your life. I wrote about what I had learned, about how self-love was the key to healing, and how the true power came from within. I shared the lessons I had learned about forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. I hit publish and smiled to myself, feeling a sense of pride that I had never felt before. It had been 6 months since I made the decision to move on, and every day felt like a step closer to becoming the woman I had always been meant to be. The emotional toll of the past, the betrayal, the lies, and the revenge had faded into distant memories, and in their place, a stronger, more independent Naomi was taking shape. Every day now felt like a new beginning. I woke up with a sense of purpose, excited to face the world and take on whatever came my way. My business was thriving. My blog had reached more women than I had ever imagined, and I was surrounded by people who truly cared about me. But even though I had moved on in so many ways, I couldn't help but wonder if I had truly healed. The emotional scars left by Andrew's betrayal, by Rachel's manipulation, still lingered. not as wounds, but as reminders of how far I had come. And as much as I had moved forward, part of me knew that I couldn't fully close the door on the past until I did one last thing. I had to let go of the anger. I had to forgive, not for them, but for myself. I sat in front of my laptop one evening, staring at the blank page. For the past few weeks, I had been struggling with what to write next on my blog. I had been sharing my story with my followers, talking about empowerment, strength, and overcoming betrayal. But something had been missing. I wasn't truly living the message I was preaching. I was still holding onto resentment, and it was time to let go. I decided to write a post about forgiveness, the true meaning of forgiveness, and why it was so crucial for healing. The words flowed easily, but the weight of the message was heavy. As I typed, I found myself revisiting memories of Andrew and Rachel, remembering how deeply I had been hurt. But with every word I typed, I felt the anger slowly fade. I wasn't excusing their behavior. I wasn't saying that what they did was okay. But I was choosing to free myself from the grip that anger had on me. The post read, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean excusing someone else's behavior. It means choosing to no longer let their actions control your happiness. It means releasing the chains that bind you to the past so you can move forward. I've learned that the most powerful act of self-love is forgiving those who have hurt you. Not for them, but for yourself." As I clicked publish, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. I had forgiven them, and in doing so, I had freed myself. It wasn't about making peace with Andrew or Rachel. It wasn't about welcoming them back into my life. It was about giving myself the freedom to let go of the past and fully embrace the future. No more holding on to what was. It was time to focus on what could be. The response to my post was overwhelming. Women from all over the world reached out to thank me, to tell me that they had gone through similar experiences and that my story had helped them in ways they couldn't describe. It was humbling. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone and that I was making a real difference in people's lives. As the weeks passed, I continued to focus on building my business and helping other women find the strength to reclaim their lives. I was starting to make a name for myself as a speaker, sharing my story at conferences and workshops. I was living my purpose, and I was no longer bound by the chains of the past. I hadn't just rebuilt my life, I had built a new one. And in the process, I had discovered a version of myself that I was proud of. A woman who had taken back her power, who had learned to love herself again, and who was determined to never let anyone take that from her. It had been nearly a year since I decided to take control of my life. And in that year, I had done more than I could have ever imagined. I had gone from a woman broken by betrayal to someone who could stand tall, knowing I had built a new future from the ashes of the old one. I had learned so much in the process, not just about others, but about myself. My business had grown exponentially, and I was now a mentor to dozens of women, all of whom had faced the same types of betrayal, heartbreak, and self-doubt I had once felt. Every time I shared my story, every time I saw a woman's life transform because of my words and guidance, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. My pain had become my purpose, and my purpose had set me free. But the road to freedom wasn't as smooth as I had hoped. There were still moments when the memories of Andrew and Rachel crept into my mind, when the loneliness would feel like a familiar weight on my chest. Those moments still existed, but I had learned how to handle them. I had learned how to let them pass without letting them define me. I had come to terms with the truth. They didn't define me, and now I was taking the final steps toward the life I had always dreamed of. I was no longer chasing anything, no longer chasing revenge, or the approval of anyone who had once left me behind. I had stopped looking back and had started looking forward to a future full of possibility, growth, and excitement. One evening, after a long day of meetings and work, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, overlooking the city. The lights sparkled like stars in the distance, and for the first time in so long, I felt at peace. No bitterness, no regret, just contentment. As I sipped my wine and let the breeze run through my hair, I thought about how far I had come. There were days when I never thought I'd be able to leave the pain behind. Days when I thought the revenge would be the only thing that would give me closure. But it wasn't revenge that healed me. It was acceptance. It was letting go of everything that had once hurt me and embracing the fact that I could move forward without carrying the weight of the past. That evening, I received a call from Claire, my best friend. She had been my rock throughout all of this. I had told her everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And she had always been there, offering support, love, and encouragement. She knew how hard it had been for me, and I knew she was proud of how far I had come. "Naomi," she said, excitement in her voice, "I think it's time we take this to the next level." "Next level?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "You've built something amazing with your business, your blog, your story. You've helped so many women, Naomi. You've built a platform, and it's time to share your story with even more people. Have you ever considered writing a book?" The question hit me like a lightning bolt. A book? I had never thought about it. But now that Claire had mentioned it, it felt like the next step in my journey. "I don't know if I can," I said, suddenly feeling self-doubt creep in. "I mean, who would want to hear my story? There are so many people who've been through worse." She laughed softly. "Naomi, your story is powerful. You've taken the pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal, and turned it into something beautiful. You've helped more people than you even realize. And a book? It's the perfect way to reach even more women who need to hear your words." I sat in silence for a moment, absorbing what she said. It was true. I had been so focused on the past and on revenge that I hadn't realized just how much I had already accomplished. I had a story to tell, one that wasn't just about revenge, but about healing, self-love, and finding strength in the face of adversity. "I think I'm ready," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "Let's do it." It had been a few months since I made the decision to write my book, and the process was both terrifying and exhilarating. I never considered myself a writer, but I realized something important during this journey. My story wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who had ever faced betrayal, loss, or hardship. It was about overcoming the impossible, about finding your strength in the darkest of times. I wasn't just telling my story. I was giving others the courage to tell their own. As I sat at my desk, surrounded by stacks of papers, notes, and coffee cups, I felt a sense of pride I had never felt before. My life had transformed in ways I hadn't expected. A year ago, I was a woman broken by betrayal, fighting tooth and nail for revenge. And now I was a woman who had taken that pain, turned it into something powerful, and was ready to share it with the world. The pain was no longer my identity. It was my foundation, my stepping stone. I had finished the first draft of my book, and the words felt alive, raw, and powerful. It wasn't perfect yet. I still had revisions to make, but I was proud of what I had accomplished. It felt like I was finally writing the ending to my own story, one where I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, and more than that, a leader. But as I neared the completion of my book, the reality of what I was about to do set in. I was about to expose my entire journey to the world, my marriage, my heartache, my fight for revenge, my rebirth. I knew the book would get attention. It would be controversial, no doubt, and many people would have their opinions. Some would love it, some would hate it. But I was no longer afraid of judgment. The moment I had started my healing process, I had let go of my fear of what others thought. It had been Andrew's family that had controlled my life for so long, and even now I could feel the pull of their judgment, but their approval no longer mattered. I called my agent that afternoon to let her know I had completed the draft. She was thrilled, of course, but I could sense the excitement in her voice when she said, "This is going to be a game changer. You're going to help so many women with this." I wasn't doing it for the accolades. I wasn't writing the book for recognition or success. I was doing it because I knew that my journey had a purpose. Every single hardship I had faced, every painful moment, had led me to this moment, to this book. And this book wasn't just for me. It was for every woman who had ever been torn down, who had ever felt like they didn't have a voice. It was my way of saying, "You are not alone." I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had already proven to myself that I was capable of more than I had ever believed. As I submitted the final draft to my publisher, I sat back and took a deep breath. My journey had come full circle. I had gone from a woman who was manipulated and betrayed by the people closest to her to a woman who had reclaimed her life, her happiness, and her power. In the weeks that followed, the buzz around my book started to grow. The publishing house began preparing for the release, and soon I was scheduling interviews, book signings, and promotional events. It was surreal. Everything I had been afraid of, everything I thought would hold me back, had become the driving force behind my success. But the most beautiful thing wasn't the book's success or the recognition. It was the way I had finally started to feel whole again. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from my past. I wasn't consumed by my anger or my need for revenge. I had forgiven myself. I had let go of the pain. And in doing so, I had become a woman who was stronger than ever before. I knew there was still more to learn, more to discover, but I also knew that I was ready. Ready for the next chapter, ready for the future, and ready for whatever came next. The journey of self-love, of healing, of rediscovering myself. It was ongoing, but I was no longer afraid. I had finally become the woman I was always meant to be. It had been a few months since my book was published, and the response had been overwhelming. The emails, the messages, the stories shared by women who had read my journey. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. I had set out to heal myself, to rebuild my life, but in doing so, I had inadvertently helped so many others do the same. I had been scared when I first started writing, scared that the world wouldn't accept my truth, that I was exposing too much. But now, as I looked at the thousands of people who had reached out to thank me for sharing my pain, my healing, and my strength, I realized something. I had found my purpose. The book had catapulted me into a position I had never anticipated. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a leader. My words had power. My story was more than just a personal journey. It was a source of empowerment for others. I was helping women find the strength to reclaim their lives, just as I had done. The messages I received were full of hope and gratitude, and I couldn't ignore the fact that my own growth had become something that extended beyond myself. One evening, as I sat in my office, working on my next project, I heard the familiar ping of a new email. It was from my publisher, and it was marked with a sense of urgency. I clicked on it, and my heart skipped a beat when I read the subject line, "Important news about your book." I opened the email, reading the words with disbelief. "Naomi, we've just received word that your book has been selected for a major national award for best nonfiction. We'll be sending you more details soon. Congratulations on all your hard work and your inspiring journey. This is just the beginning for you." I sat there, stunned. My book, my story, was being recognized on a national scale. For a moment, I couldn't process it. I had spent so many years living in the shadows, letting my past control my decisions, my emotions, my future. And now I was being celebrated for it. I thought back to everything I had been through: the betrayal, the heartbreak, the pain I had endured. I thought about the revenge I had taken, how it had consumed me, and how, in the end, I had found my true strength by letting go. The recognition I was receiving was more than just an acknowledgement of my book. It was a reflection of the woman I had become. I wasn't just a victim of my circumstances anymore. I was a woman who had faced everything head on and emerged victorious. And now my story was being heard by even more people. It wasn't just about getting revenge on Rachel or Andrew anymore. It was about showing everyone, including myself, that I was capable of so much more than I ever believed. As the days passed, the calls and emails from various media outlets began to pour in. Invitations to speak at conferences, interviews with podcasts, TV spots. It all felt surreal. But as I stood in front of the camera for my first interview, I realized something. I was no longer afraid. I was no longer hiding from the pain of my past. I was owning it. The woman I was now wasn't the broken, angry wife who had once been manipulated by Rachel. She wasn't the woman who had been consumed by revenge and bitterness. She was a woman who had taken control of her life, who had turned her pain into power, and who was now living her truth. I shared my story with others, not as a warning, but as a beacon of hope. I spoke about healing, self-love, and the importance of not letting anyone dictate your worth. The more I spoke, the more I realized that my journey was far from over. There was so much more I could do, so many more women I could help. The future was wide open. In a moment of reflection, I sat down at my desk and wrote a message to myself as a reminder of how far I had come. Naomi, you've been through hell and back. You've felt pain and loss in ways others can't even imagine. But you did it. You survived. You thrived. You've taken everything that was thrown at you and turned it into something beautiful. Never forget that you are powerful, worthy, and capable of anything. Your story isn't over. It's only just beginning. As the months passed and my life continued to evolve, I realized something profound. My transformation wasn't just a story about overcoming betrayal and hurt. It was about empowerment, strength, and self-worth. The pain of my past had shaped me, yes, but it no longer controlled me. I had moved beyond the person I was before the betrayal. I had stepped into something greater, and with every step I took, the weight of the past lifted further. The success of my book was just the beginning. I had built a platform, a community of women who were ready to rise above their circumstances, ready to take control of their lives, just as I had done. Every day, I received messages of thanks from women who had been inspired by my journey. Women who had been stuck in their own pain, unsure how to move forward, who now saw a way out. But something else happened too. As I helped others, I also helped myself. The more I shared my story, the more I healed. The more I spoke about forgiveness, about letting go of the past, the more I learned to forgive myself. I had made mistakes. I had hurt others in my quest for revenge. But in helping others heal, I had started healing too. I no longer carried the burden of bitterness and anger. It wasn't about forgetting what had been done to me, but it was about choosing to move forward, to focus on the future and not the past. It was a rainy afternoon when I received another message, but this one was different. It wasn't from a follower or reader. It was from Andrew. I hadn't heard from him in months, and yet there it was, his name flashing on my screen. At first I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to revisit that chapter. Part of me wanted to stay far away from him, from the past. But as I stared at the screen, I knew that my journey wasn't just about building myself up. It was about closure, and this was my final step. I opened the message. "I've been thinking about everything, Naomi," it began. "I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo. I don't know how to make it right, but I wanted to say that I'm truly sorry for the way I treated you. I know you don't owe me anything, but I hope one day we can both move forward and find peace." For a moment, I sat there, my hands trembling. I didn't know how to respond. The anger, the hurt, it wasn't gone, but it was fading. The revenge, the need to make him suffer. It had been replaced with something more powerful: peace. I took a deep breath and replied, "Thank you for the apology, but I've moved on. I hope you can find peace too." That was it. There was no long conversation, no reopening of old wounds. It was a simple, clean ending. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't need him or his apology to move forward. I had already done the hard work of letting go. I had already reclaimed my life. And that was the final lesson I had learned. I don't need anyone's approval to live the life I deserve. Now, my life is full of opportunities. I've taken control of my future, and nothing, not Andrew, not Rachel, not anyone, can take that away from me. I have learned that real strength comes from within. We all have the power to rebuild, to transform, and to create the life we deserve. If you're struggling with your own pain, betrayal, or heartbreak, know that you are not alone. You have the power to overcome it. You have the strength to rebuild your life, just like I did. Start today. Don't wait for anyone's approval. Embrace your own strength and take that first step toward healing. Subscribe too for more stories of transformation, strength, and empowerment. Your story is not over, it's just beginning.